Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the East Tim Zoning Task Force. This meeting will be video recorded and broadcast over local access channel 8 and through the town website at www.eastham-ma.gov. Welcome, everyone. I was just mentioning we do have a quorum, but one of our members, Carolyn, is traveling. But she has given both Jackie and I feedback, so we can, when we get to next year's work plan, we can include her comments there. Pat, I know has circulated minutes, so
Yeah.
thank you, Pat. Has everyone had a chance to read the minutes? Okay, can I get a motion to accept the minutes?
So.
Second,
Second.
all in favor?
Aye.
Aye, great. Okay, so now we have really an open agenda. This is sort of a debrief about town meeting and really debrief about sort of the process over the last year. So, I can begin, but I can, you know, if folks, I mean, I'll just open it up with some comments. I think that, and I will tell you, I heard from Jackie and Rich a little bit of, the feeling that this year, they just said, we didn't pay enough attention. We were consumed with the budget and the wastewater. And we really needed, we recognize we need to do something. And the same, we should have been more involved. In the same breath, which was very positive, both of them said, we highly, highly value the work of the task force and really wanted to continue. So that was really good feedback. I think there was some technical glitches. Obviously, the misprint for the site coverage analysis, posed a glitch. I think that the inclusionary zoning, because we did all those strikeouts, made 8 or 9 pages. It just made it really difficult. And I think that and we can talk about site coverage. I'll skip the site coverage. We can talk about that in general, but I think one of the things I would really like to talk to the group about is just the notion of, we did a lot of public education around the DCPC, and we sort of reverted to what was the process we had the previous 3 years, this year. And so we, in some ways, did nothing different, but I think we sort of we understand now that probably more public engagement before we get to town meeting. And we could talk about ways in which that public engagement can be achieved. So that's my top of the trees kind of thing. I'd love to go around and maybe Paul or Jackie, do we want to take some specific notes? Because one of the things we want to go back to on June 15th is to both preview a preliminary list of work plan for next year with the select board, but also to give some feedback regarding what we think worked and didn't work. So, it'd be really good if we could get some things down here today. And also, I think Jamie Dimitri has raised, and, I've said it's a good inflection point after 5 years to sort of look at the charter of the task force. Again, everyone is saying we don't want the task force to change, but we've got some housekeeping. We've always joked about there's no tenure, it's a lifetime appointment to the task force. So there's no tenure, there's no rotation. A lot of other committees have 3-year terms, and things sort of happen organizationally that we haven't tidied up. So there's some of the logistics there, and then I think it would be good to have a conversation. So anyways,
But is there a reason for the lifetime when it was established?
I think it was just an oversight,
Yeah.
or just an oversight.
That's how we were simply said that.
That's what I'm wondering.
Well, when I went in 2021, they said, and this is forever. What? So, in any event, do you want to just go around the room and we can all sort of give thoughts?
So I think everyone acknowledges the technical glitches and the complexity of what we were trying to do. I think would be difficult for people to follow if they weren't already sort of into this, right? So, and I wonder if there's another way to deal with the FAR issue. It just seemed like I think it's very technical, and again, if people weren't already on this little road, that it would be extremely hard for them to get on it, and town meeting's not the place where you're trying to explain what you've been doing, even though I tried to do that. So it would be that earlier on, yeah, there's some public engagement, and maybe trying to reach out to people that normally don't come out, because clearly they did come out. So that was that was one thing. And then I wondered if, so a few years ago, when we put all the time and energy into tea time and all that, and people still haven't seen results. And I know there's an RFP sort of bubbling, and I'm wondering if part of the issue is that people need to see how what we do impacts the town in a positive way. So maybe there's some way we can, and again, that might be part of outreach, just make people more aware of how what we're doing here contributes to the town.
Mhm.
And then I just read, I think it's Long Island, there's some place where we don't count basements. And we saw on the planning board, basement that could be a house. And there's some town I've been reading about where if it's finished basement, they don't count, they do count as part of the FAR. I don't know if we
We
want to
actually
go-
changed that. We didn't count it and then we eliminated it. Specifically, at the time we were putting constraints on the building map.
Yeah.
We were trying to maximize what people could do internally. And so
Right.
that's why we didn't have basements count.
Okay, so I have to go back and look, but there's one of these resort communities that
Mhm.
do count that when it's a finished,
Yeah,
basically another living space. It's just something, I mean, that's pretty out there and, yeah. And I think we're always gonna have, a tug between people who think that the character of Eastham is something that should be preserved. People that just wanna build their houses and don't see themselves as part of the neighborhood. They see their house. So, I don't know. So I think it's more target to people.
Tom?
I think, like you said, the complexity was a big challenge. And I almost wonder if maybe we can, if there's cleanup needed, and clearly, we look to, Paul and Jackie as experts there. At the risk of adding more work, is there a way to, in the future, to have a cleanup article that we can say, there's no policy changes here, it's just, simple cleanup, just approve it, right? And then separate out things, and maybe that forces us into a two-step process, of course. But for instance, FAR, as an example, whether or not we want to do that, I don't know, but you could switch over to FAR and say everything's the same, we're just switching it to the floor area ratio, and then in the future go in and say, all right, we're going to make some adjustments to that. I think that'd be easier for people to swallow, because otherwise they're really struggling with how much is in there. Where's the policy change and what are we really proving? And
Yep.
they were really confused. The other item, of course, would be again, at the risk of adding more work, is keeping each article self-contained. Having definition changes included in that particular article, so it's not cross-coupled with other articles. And that way, if something is struck, that it's not impacting the others. I mean, that might be really hard, but maybe something to strive for.
Is that possible, Paul? Do we have combined things?
In the same warrant article, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Kevin?
Yeah, I suppose something you could have done is you could have done definitions A and definitions B. Definitions A are, here's things that are gonna change that have no interlink to anything, and that's one article.
Yeah,
And then here's a second round of definition updates that are dependent on these other things that we did.
Yeah, yeah.
Then you could have at least jettisoned the B section instead of all of the changes.
Right.
So with the distance of time, since the meeting, my thoughts have changed a bit. The night of the meeting and the subsequent follow-up night, I was angry because I didn't see that coming. A lot of people didn't see it coming. They were just pulling the FAR things. So I was like, whoa, I just felt kind of betrayed. In retrospect, it was a good thing that it was done. Because when we showed up that night, there were people outside handing out flyers all about opposing it, reasons why, and like there's this organized opposition. It's like, there's no time. Oh yeah, I think I saved a sheet for the future. So in retrospect, it was a good thing. But whether it was possible to let us know with a little more notice than while you're sitting in your seat waiting to get to that article, I don't know. I wasn't involved with that end of it. But it was a good thing that it was pulled because otherwise it might not have been successful and you have to wait longer before you get it back.
Yeah.
So that's where I am with that. I agree with everything's been said so far in terms of complexity and educating the public and all that, so no need to review it. The other issue I think we had to face was this very long agenda.
Yeah.
We hadn't even gotten to that article yet.
And we're at the end of it.
Yeah,
Well, and especially if you try to run it through that night, it was so complex that people's brains are fried after going through the budget stuff and it was just too much. It was just too much. So that's more on people who put the town meeting together as to looking at the agenda and saying, hey, look, this is getting doable in one night or what. Like, I think the education part is really key because we look at it and we may not think it's complex because we've been talking about it for months and we understand it perfectly and that's great. But for the public, no. So you have to kind of grease the wheel a little bit and make sure that's break it down to simpler language so people can understand it and not be so afraid of it. But that opposition will be there next year too. And I think it's good that we are aware of that now. We have their little sheet of what they object to and try to address some of those points, at least the key points, to kind of take the wind out of their sails on that. Pat, you had mentioned basements. We had West Monmouth planning board the case where they're looking to build a large house and they're looking to build out the basement. I look at that almost as an advantage for our presentation next year in the sense that the amount that they were looking for, the size of the house they're looking for was within, whether it was the new standards or the old standards, it was still within 4,800 square feet as it's defined. And there's other reasons that people may not agree with it. But at the same time, one of the objections that our detractors had handing out their sheet was, you can't build a house, or what's the size of the house and all this kind of stuff. Time out. If it's okay to go to 4,800 square feet, and you throw in the finished basement, now you're over 6,000.
Exactly. Which is
That's no different than what it was before the change was proposed. And I think that there's that kind of advantage built into the way that we've done it to not count basements and not count attics and that sort of thing. That kind of shoots that argument down. Now, maybe they don't have a basement that they can finish. Well, we can't tailor it to each and every house. But I think we could look at the objections that they had and see what would be done to neutralize it or tweak what we're doing, because maybe there's an argument there we didn't think of. Kind of a thing. So in approaching it for next year, I think it's a good place to start with that. That's it.
I have a couple comments to you, but let's get to Mark.
Thanks, Kevin. Actually, the advantage of going third is I get to read what people have said and take credit. Several of the points I was going to make were just covered. Touching on what Kevin said, the number one thing that I was going to put was our ability to communicate. and our ability to communicate on each of these topics, we should look at something like the 3-slide rule, which is, here's what the problem is. Here's what we're not changing, or here are the workarounds. And so if we talk about, any of these, whether we talk about fencing or storage containers or some of the other, I mean, the fire issue is a little bit more complex because there were physical errors made in the printing that made it difficult to fight that, argue that point. But having just 3 slides, it's, here's what the problem is, here's what we're not doing. And like you said, like, hey, a 4,800 square foot house can still have a 1,200 square foot basement. That's,
Yep.
you're at this huge limit. The same idea of fencing. We're not changing any fences except for the very front fence facing the street. We think this is a safety issue or whatever. We could just say, and you show a picture of that. And this is the only thing we're against. We're not against any other type of fence you're putting in. And the idea of storage containers would be, or let's say go to boats. Like currently, everybody who owns a camper van in town is violating the rule. You're supposed to have a permit from the town, and we're trying to clean things up, simplify things, deregulate. Just drop a few of those things in there, and by deregulating, we're saying, we're not gonna regulate your trailers. This is not a new version of regulating camper vans. We're just saying we're gonna apply the current storage, rather shed rules about setbacks, which is really, really reasonable. Anyone, because several people have come up to me and say, oh, I can't believe we're gonna start regulating them. I know about 5 people that own campers. I'm like, we're not, we're deregulating them. And so anyways, I think the communication piece has to be
Yeah.
concise. 3 slides, here's a picture of the problem, blah, blah, blah. To reiterate what Pat said there about, some people want to preserve the character of the town and other people just want to build my house. Yeah, we see that every day in the hearings, and we had a very good one a month ago with a woman who was basically, we need to just get on and vote. We're done making changes. We're either going to build this house or we're not. So I think that you do have to address that, saying, yeah, the town's not frozen in place. The people that live here now are just as important as the people that lived here 200 years ago. I mean, that's who we are as a nation. So I think the idea of saying, well, you know what, that house was here, and you have to build a house that looks just like the house that was built 100 years ago. I'm not for that at all. I think that we want to build within reason of things, but I don't want to see the house. I don't just want to see stuff get built to like it looks like Chatham, and those are a few of my points, but the key one is around communications.
Yeah.
And I do agree that it was probably a really good thing that we pulled out all the rules and gave that to the planning board to approve, because I can't imagine how long the meeting would be if we had all the implementation rules to roll into town meeting. So that was a big plus for us.
Yeah.
A few of my points. And it was a very long agenda. I don't know how we avoid that.
Well, I mean, just to give some feedback, I mean, and this was something that came up in a conversation with Rich. I mean, I think closer coordination, I mean, we obviously work very closely with the planning board, a little closer communication with the town manager, because they've got bigger, there's budgets and overrides and lots of complicated stuff. So sort of the quotient of how much complicated stuff can go on any one town agenda is something that probably should be calibrated, that we can really prioritize what's important. I think to get, I think this is gonna be a challenge. When we go back to FAR and the site coverage issues, we were very explicit, and I don't know how we go back to do this. We were very explicit when we put those limits in, that they were not a right to have like 4,800 or 3,000. It was the upper limit, which had to be equally balanced with community impact. And so we went back to, the planning board basically said, it's too difficult for us to do the community impact side. Why don't you adjust the numbers? So I would say that, we should go back and look at the numbers, and I think there's legitimate arguments for sort of where or somewhat close to where we came down to. But I would also, I'm kind of looking at Paul and Jackie. I think this other side of that, because right now, without sort of a culture that the community impact should account for at least half the consideration as opposed to this number being the right, that's going to have to come from the planning and the ZBA boards culturally. I mean, that's just going to have to be something that's discussed. So whether, I know Jackie has started a process to have them identify criteria. I just think that's gonna have, that really should be pushed even while we're in the background, maybe looking at the development limits, because whatever we put as a limit, people are going to interpret as their right to build to the max. So that's just that. The, two other quick points and I'll stop. When we did the site coverage limits initially, and I was reminded of this by a couple people, there had been a house, the first house that had come up that was 5,900 square feet. And that caused, and we're talking about 4 years ago or something, I don't even remember the property, it caused outrage. So there was community outrage. And when our development limits went before town meeting, there were several people who got up and said, we're living through a nightmare with these big houses. So there was there was another point of view. And so, maybe, whenever proposals that get done, we might want to look back to the dozen projects that came through and make sure there's outreach to those abutters, like you complained bitterly about us, maybe we need to sort of, monitor that and reach back and say, this is your moment to speak up. We're trying to respond to your concerns, speak up because the other side will,
Who would do that?
I mean, it could be as simple as just identifying, who are the neighbors, we'd have lists of people, and we could,
Cause I wondered, because the planning board had gone through something maybe a year ago, we had lots of neighborhood people show up. And I wondered where they were at town meeting, cause I didn't hear them, that,
Mhm.
Yeah.
pop up.
I think so what I'm thinking of, there was quite a lot, almost everyone in the neighborhood showed up. It wasn't a big neighborhood, it was like 14 houses,
street was it?
16 houses.
Off of,
Campground,
Higgins
off of,
Bay,
it's,
you got,
I could drive there right now blind, but I can't think of the name of the freaking street.
Across the street
But I
from the
think
bay,
that not every,
across from the bay though, not on the bay, but across the street.
what's the landing? It's
the
That's a
landing,
campground.
and there's the campground road landing here, there's the street that comes in.
Higgins.
that's Higgins.
And you
And
go
then
up
it's
that
the
way
left-
on the left-hand side and you get
Bow
into a
road.
dirt road
Bow.
kind of thing. And
Bow.
the neighborhood
Bow.
is basically, but there's like 14 or 16 houses and then this.
And then big piece.
But I think not every one of that 14 or 16 houses were year-round residents. They showed up because they were property owners.
Yeah,
And they, or wherever they drove in from 3 times, give them a lot of credit for that. But they wouldn't be necessarily at the town meeting.
I think it fits well into Martin's 3 slide.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of communicating and really what are the high hitters in a very succinct fashion. I mean, the write-up was awesome, but I wonder how many people in the end read it all.
Yeah.
And how many were confused when they saw the language that, oh my God, is this really what we have today? Is that what we're voting on? They didn't
Right.
realize that it's not changed. Be very specific about it. I think that's a great idea.
Well,
Thanks.
picking up on the 3 slide rule, the last thing I was gonna say is, we heard that afterwards, that when Orleans puts zoning before the town, they actually put a little preview up on the screen. They give you like the 3 slide rule. Here's what it is, here's why it's happening, whatever. And that got me thinking about the fact that like certain things, for example, like even the fences, that we got a majority of the vote, but we lost the 2/3 by about 15, 16 votes. So I wonder whether if we had had a 3 slide presentation, but that presentation also had like a couple of slides of just pictures of some of the roadways we're seeing in Mid-Cape, saying, this might be coming to you. I mean, there's ways we could do that. And I think with video, you could do things with the 3 slide rule and pictures and have some narration in the back. I mean, you could do something in like 2 minutes.
at town meeting.
Because we want to do it.
It could be produced. As soon as we get the agenda, it could be produced and we could be pumping it out on social media, on the website.
And if people want, and people can come to one of the 15 meetings
Yes.
ahead of time and say, you know what,
Yeah.
I'm interested in this, I really want to.
So we could
get
pump
done."
it out and then
Great
have a couple
advocates.
community meetings and then also repeat. I mean, with complicated stuff like this, if you repeat it 5 or 6 times, it takes probably 5 or 6 times for people to start digesting it. But it could be an elaborate PowerPoint with voiceover, I mean, and it could be really short with, again, staying with the
Yeah.
3 cents. three slide rule, but that would be, I thought, well, to even if we didn't do everything else, even that at town meeting would have clarified for people.
And we can also use the Turn It Up podcast. Right, have a session just, with Kayla and show
Yeah.
that and
Yeah.
have that available on the
Yeah.
YouTube channel and point people to that. They can, review that at their
Yeah.
leisure.
And and we didn't have time, and I'm glad I have it somewhere in that bag, but God help me. The handout, I was trying to, when I saw that handout, like it was Sunday night before the Monday meeting. But there's counter arguments to that, like one data point, for example, oh my God, you're gonna lose property value terribly. Well, Paul had already done some conversation with the town assessor, so it's not as straightforward, you could have a 4,800 square foot house and a 6,000 square foot house, and depending upon location and materials and design, that 4,800 square foot house could be much more valuable than the 6,000. So it's not an apples and oranges kind of thing there. But yeah, so I just think that some of those things we should, oh, the one data point that I did do was I said, okay, we put this in 2023. What has the property value? Property values have gone up almost 60% since we put the last this restriction in. So I'm like, wait a minute, we restricted everyone and it went up 60%. So, there's other market forces. And I think to that point we could, and I have to say that, I'm sure, the couple that put that sheet together, seemed very intelligent, very, knowledgeable. There was a lot of nuance there that I felt was, there might have been a few lawyers advising.
Yeah,
That's
to me, it was,
I didn't get the sheet. I'll take
I didn't.
it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
but to me, it was like, it just reeked of self-interest.
Oh, yeah.
Real estate people, and I'm not trying to dump on real estate people, but they all were reading this stuff and said, oh, that's in there too, because it's gonna impact sales, whatever.
Yeah, no,
There was one that talked about, this one I almost choked on, talked about, it's gonna, hurt the real estate industry and feeling bad for the families of brokers because their income is gonna go down. Like,
oh, here it is.
go ahead and try and sell that one. I mean, I'll just let that one stand
Yeah,
out.
really.
Because they have a reputation for something different, but I mean, and again, not to dump on them, but, I think to go through that, there's a few we can just dismiss right off, on the hand, but others that certainly will get people's attention, and I think having the counter arguments that we already know about, in our presentation, kind of take the wind out of the sails of some of us. Yeah.
This is the handout.
Single sided?
Two-sided.
Yeah.
Two sided.
A lot of facts.
So just two sided, it's lost me.
Big font.
I'm not reading it.
Well, any event, we have a long agenda, so I don't, I'm sort of. I mean, I can try to write up, you took a lot of notes, we could write up some bullet points. I think we should just, I think some of the big,
Thank you.
the big, sort of things going forward to next year is closer coordination with town manager to, to calibrate the, to calibrate both the proposals as well as, whatever else is gonna be put on town meeting, just so we can be there. Thinking about how do we communicate, thinking about how all of the people who would in fact support something like this because they keep coming out to meetings, how do we reach them in some way and encourage them to voice their concerns? And then just obviously doing a lot of technical analysis. That was more than a little alarmist, the sky's gonna fall if this happens. So I think we just need really, as we do our 3-slide rule, we need to sort of address different things that are being put out there. I don't know. Is it, so can we can probably put together, we can put together a slide that
Yeah.
kind of just does this for 50. Yes. You too. I'm asking task force, but I'd really like to hear your very candid thoughts.
I agree with all the comments, and I think, also, we've been so successful in the past that, we we didn't do anything different than we've been doing. We have had near total success, so. You know, it does, when you have that streak, you don't really go looking to change things up in your approach. So, but it was a good lesson learned. Obviously, there's just unlucky points of the printing error and all that kind of stuff, but um, I think, but yeah, I agree with all the points. I think there's some good things we can implement to adapt. I like the idea of the video, the 3 slide thing, the video, I think it's a good model to follow through our whole process. So when we start going to the public and then on through the town meeting, I think closer coordination with Rich, we can figure out if we can do something at town meeting also. That gets into just some logistics between the select board and the manager and the moderator.
Moderator.
You know,
Well, maybe we
but
could,
we can, I
maybe
think,
we could check out Orleans and find out how
Yeah.
they. You
we have the
check
discussion
planning
now
step,
and we
yeah.
get it going.
Yeah.
I think it's
How they-
great.
And if it's 2 minutes, if it's like 2 minutes an article or a minute,
Yeah,
minute and a
well,
half.
it's already in the zone of like
Yeah.
months before this, all our communication is being that, compact.
Yeah.
I think so that would be settled. I think just specifically on the site coverage, that article, we really started that trying to solve a problem that we're continuing to have with the planning board, and just the ability to just utilize that and to wrestle with under the limit, but too big for the neighborhood. I think out of that came a technical cleanup of like switching this whole thing over to FAR, which I think just makes sense anyways, because that's really what we've been doing. What's been on the books since 2007 is FAR, we just called it something different. So I think it was like the problem solving worked into the technical fix, which I think is valid and we should do that. Just like on process going forward, I think, and Jack and I were talking that trying to further isolate what is the problem we have to solve, what do we keep coming up against by planning board with these hearings, what are the difficulties? And we've had a few past couple of months that have got into this territory. So my thought was just on process is that maybe this particular topic is something we need to go back and workshop more with the planning board and let them, we met with the planning board, we had the workshop, but it's kind of like a quick hit and we're covering a lot of stuff. So I think the FAR thing, we really need to like workshop that, muscle through it, figure out what is the issue and do we think we solved that issue with what we proposed this year? So there's that. Do we, I think it's just tighter examination with the actual planning board, the whole group, they're the ones that have to work with this, and it's almost like a technical thing. A lot of this other stuff the task force does is we're trying to solve or improve broader problems, and this is how it really started with the housing issue, the McMansions, the combining the smaller lots and taking away potential more modest housing stock. And that was really a housing issue what's the zoning component? And there's been, I think the clearest cut successes for the task force have been when we were solving those issues, and we kind of morphed into technical issues. And so I think that would be something to think about. This one, sure, it's probably gonna come up when we talk about the nature of the task force going forward in the chart, and it's kind of like, maybe that's a demarcation of like, is this a technical issue? Again, the task force put in the broad concept of the site coverage just to address the broader housing issue. Now we're into like the technical components of how do we actually utilize this stuff. So that's just something to consider.
Between the roles.
The roles, and we're managing agendas and workloads and which group is doing what. So I think that's just like a process piece, but yeah, I think overall, I think everyone's made good points. I agree with it.
Going back to the butter issue, is there a shorthanded way? I'm looking at Jackie because I don't want to put a lot of work on her, but is there like it's almost like a running log, date, address, proposed 6,000 square foot building, 50 abutters showed up angry. I mean, it's almost like for us to say, it's almost like to say, wait a minute, there's been 20 of these projects and combined, there's been 100 people shown up really angry. Like, we're not just making this up. We're not sitting here going, I like this kind of house or I like that kind of house. So I think that would be very instructive for us to sort of just almost have a running log about, and that could be ZBA as well, Martin, what are the variances and what are I've heard from board members, we struggle, we struggle, we struggle. I finally, I got to yes only because I didn't,
Yeah.
and I'm uncomfortable. I mean, I've been here for 5 years. I'm taking votes that I'm uncomfortable with. So how do we distill that and know exactly,
So-
how frequently and,
So-
that type of thing?
I'll throw something out here since I'll give you a few successes that we've had with ZBA in the past 18 months and including last night. And we're pushing back on large projects, but when you try to push back on people, when you ask people directly that have come to a meeting with their lawyers to say, here's what bugs me about this house. So for instance, the house getting built behind the lighthouse is a very mid-century modern. I think it's a beautiful house, but it's right behind the lighthouse. So we pushed back on it this winter and it got taken back for redesign. But what people were pushing back on was the impact the house will have on them. Basically, you've got these decks that are gonna be overlooking my backyard, or you have so much glass. And I think we've had some success, so instead of focusing on the square footage of the house, finding out how does that house make more of an impact on the neighborhood than it should? Like it starts to impeding on, like if you've got a big house there and I don't notice it, it's one thing. But if you've got all this glass tower, and we had one on Beach Plum, and they had a glass tower overlooking the neighbor's house. And we're very successful in pushing back on that, saying, no, the amount of glazing, the amount of light spill, and the people next door were very appreciative. When it came back a few months later, there was a redesign that totally removed that. Last night's meeting, we had the house on the Lighthouse House, which I wish I brought the drawings, since it's a dramatic, I can't believe there's not more people pushing back against it, but it's a pretty house. And, but they came back I think we rejected it either January or February, in the middle of the winter, and they came back last night and they reduced the glazing facing the lighthouse by 20%. I think my ask was, my goal was 25%. They removed all the drywall on that first floor to reduce, so they're gonna replace all the drywall in the house with wood surfaces that will reduce the glare coming out. They've agreed to put a restriction on having no recessed lighting in the ceilings on any window that is visible to the south. Which is basically when you're looking to if you're looking up at a house, those recess, so all the lighting is gonna be lamps except for the dining room table. They agreed to put in the reduced E-glass is gonna cut down on glare coming back, and a few other things. And then we pushed back on the basement access. They had 4 sets of sliders in the basement, unfinished basement. And we pushed back and said, that to me is, it's like you're just opening the door to do whatever you want in the basement. And you already have a fairly large house. So anyways, we got all those concessions. And the next door neighbor was happy. Going back to the Beach Plum from a year ago, where we got rid of the light tower, that neighbor was happy with those results. And then I think the one on Bayberry that we had last night was the long one. And when we rejected that one just a month ago, that was part of the sight line, that they had a bump out on the house. For the dining room, they had a bump out for the dining room that came out about 4 feet. And then they had a deck above it. And all of this is facing the neighbor. It's not facing the bay, it's facing the neighbor next door, which wasn't there. The neighbor wasn't there complaining. But our view was, hey, when I walk by that bump out on that deck, and your first floor deck is extending, they extended the deck out beyond the house as well. So the grilling area, all that was visible as I walk up and down the street. So we pushed back and we had all that removed. And they agreed, they moved all that, so they kept the house within its footprint. Now, that didn't make everybody happy. There was one neighbor that was still very upset about the results because they were losing their view about the top of the house, which I don't think we could, they didn't like the house being as tall. But my point is that there are other tools that maybe we can look at that restrict the design of the housing, and especially this idea of light and glazing. Ben Zender, who represents almost 80%, I would say, of these cases in town, I mean, he brought these back. His client didn't want to take it back in one. He said, no, we're gonna ask for a delay. Meanwhile, his client was saying, I want to vote. She was in Florida saying, I'm ready to vote. I'm sick and tired of doing anything else. And then Ben is like, no, we're gonna come back next month if I don't get fired.
Yeah.
But, so anyways, I think we can look at other tools, like, I think we're too focused on size. Size is, I think we should continue to be focused on size, but size isn't the only tool that planning and zoning can use to make these houses less intrusive.
Yep.
I think
Which
it's,
I agree, and on planning board, there's been a number of cases that we've done that.
yeah,
You know, when the tools are already in there and the people have agreed. There was one, God, right, came with it in the streets, but may have even been on Bayberry at one point 2 years ago. And the original thing was glass everywhere. And they had like 4 decks, so it was interesting. And when they came back after we had objected to all this, they changed all the glass and the decks were reduced and a bunch of different things to it. They're like, okay, I had no problem with the size on that at all. It was like that fit, but it was more a question of why does everyone in the neighborhood have to join your party? Because, you know, there's all these windows everywhere, light everywhere. And it's like, just let people live their lives. The party with yourself. But those tools are there. I guess I still emphasize a lot the size, and I think what we proposed this time is probably as far as I could reasonably expect it to go. As far as the site coverage and stuff like that. And part of my issue is that of setting precedent, because if there isn't a constant tension on that issue and the larger houses just start to get approved without any particular concern about it, then battle's lost. Doesn't matter what you say, if you've got like 12 things over the last 3 years, then we've always allowed that kind of thing.
Yeah.
You know, it's all case by case, I recognize that too, but there are tools, and I agree with you that those make a lot of difference as to what the impact is on the neighbors. But if you're not one of those neighbors, you're 2 blocks over or the other side of town, and suddenly you face that kind of a situation. If around town, a lot of precedents have been set where, you know, reduce the number of windows and keep your 5,000 square foot house. I cringe as those people. So
So,
So
what
just one other quick,
Okay.
just, I agree with both of your comments. I think the other part of that FAR warrant was we were revamping the thresholds, which that part's too bad that, you know, the baby got thrown out with the bathwater, not that, but I think we should still keep with that. That simplifies things. I think, but going back to the problem we were trying to solve with what those recalibrating those numbers, so we didn't have that struggling every time, but I do think that it is still confusing, even if we gotta look at that, but then the language about that you reference, like there's language that says you're not guaranteed to get the max. And I think just that alone sets a confusion from the start, because people look at the chart, say, oh, I can go to 4,800.
Yeah.
Except for
that's
down,
what Ben Zender
and I
tells me.
think, you know, there's always ways to, you can always look at, is there a better way to write the bylaw so it's clear or whatever, but I think that's an important point, but you know, we got another chance to relook at everything and there's some further clarification.
So before we move off this topic, because we've got to get to next year's agenda, I'd love to hear from Jackie, your thoughts.
So I'll try to be quick. I will say that in the days before and following town meeting on FAR, what came to me was support for the limits that we're proposing at the top. Pretty broad support, and concerns about the new limits at the bottom. And that the smaller lots in those 2 smallest bands, so our lots under 20,000 square feet, felt the most penalized
Mm-hmm,
by the proposed change and didn't understand why.
mm-hmm.
So I'll say that. I think when we look at that language that's in 743 and links to 10.3 to the planning board, really the bread and butter of the planning board, where we have this issue of, but I want to go to the max. This ZBA case is a great example where the light from the windows directly into the neighbor's house is a very tangible neighborhood impact. We know what that looks like. We know how that feels. We can envision the situation. Even if they never throw a party in their life, they just like the lights on at night. My kid walks around, turns on every light in the house. When we look at planning board projects, like one that is in process right now, that is just under the maximum. It's on an acre of land. It's gonna be just under 4,800 square feet if it goes through. It would have been reduced to about 4,400 square feet if these regulations had passed, and the result of that for the homeowner would have been that he would have taken the roof off the the covered deck on the back.
That's it.
That's it. That would have put him right back into the appropriate, so the house itself would not, in his mind, have shifted. Where his opposition is being, is generating right now from his very vocal neighborhood is about their fears of perceived future use, which the planning board does not have the ability to regulate. So we associate big dwellings with big rental parties.
That's the.
Which is not.
Which is not illogical at all.
Yeah.
But is also not currently something that the planning board can say, because this could be used as a big short-term rental. That's the justification for us wanting a reduced size, because now we're working in this land of hypotheticals, and you have an applicant saying, this is my family's summer home. This is our dream home that we have been working toward. This is our opportunity to design the most perfect home that we've ever imagined. And it's really for us. And so, I mean, we saw it, I think, last month of neighbors essentially saying, well, I don't believe you.
Right.
And the planning board cannot be the arbiter of who is telling the truth. They could turn around and sell it. And that's within their legal right to do. So I think what I'm hearing from butters, and this was true on Bow Road, is the fear about the future use, which is a valid fear, which is a logical line of thinking, and not really what the planning board has the tools to manage. So, I think when we look at the big end of the spectrum, I worry about that. When we have houses that come in at, say, right around 3,000 square feet, or under the 15% rule, houses that are under 3,000 square feet, I don't think that we hear neighbors coming in and saying, but what if there's a short-term rental? Because I can rent my house and you can rent your house. Right? And so it's this fear associated with these really big houses, that I think is where in my short time, has been the nexus of most of the concern on the large scale, projects. We have others that have come in under those first two sort of small lot criteria, where the neighbors, I mean, I remember having one neighbor called and he said, I'm not gonna come down there, I have two questions. Okay. Is it gonna encroach in any of the setbacks toward my house? No. Are they putting in really big windows that are gonna look into my backyard? No. Great, wish them the best of luck. Because it's how does it impact me?
Yeah.
Right? So I think where I see the planning board needing support, and we're trying to do this with the rubric, but is navigating that, you're within the allowed size. It's bigger than we're really comfortable with, but you have a farmer's porch, you have dormers, you have a pitched roof, you have shingles, you have a garage, you have an appropriate driveway, you're putting in screening. It's really big, but it checks every other mark. So the actual discomfort is, and we hear the questions, why does every bedroom need a bathroom? If this homeowner had been willing to be a little more glib in a meeting, which he wasn't, and I applaud him for that, his answer should have been, because I can afford it. Because I can afford to give everybody in my family and all of my weekend guests their own bathroom. Why shouldn't I? Why does it need to have a pool? Cause I have 3 teenagers and they wanna swim.
Yeah.
You know, why does that matter? You know, the question back is, why does that matter to my neighbors? These are allowed residential uses. It's just a really big house.
Right, but
Well, within
every
our
bedroom
limits.
with a bathroom, there is a rental, right? There's a,
That's what people
Airbnb.
associate it with,
that's right,
It
that's,
is.
that's why they're worrying,
but it's not a guarantee.
right?
If I could give myself my own bathroom, it would be what I would do, you know, so
Yeah.
I think that we just keep walking through this. The neighborhood concern comes from that, and I'm gonna be really candid, comes from, we saw it last month, a real localism, we don't know you. We don't know you. You didn't walk around with muffins and introduce yourself to this neighborhood. You didn't ask us if we liked this house that you're building. So we don't like it and we don't like you. And the planning board again is not in the role
Yeah.
of saying, if you didn't go make friends with your neighbors and play nice in the sandbox, then we're not gonna approve your house.
But
But that keeps coming up with these big projects. We don't know you. You're not from here. Most of that neighborhood is not actually from here, but they are now. And I'm a little, I get disheartened as an Eastham resident in those meetings
Mm-hmm.
when that is the neighborhood turnout. We don't like you, you didn't talk to us, so we're gonna oppose you. Versus we saw one that came in as a small project on Cove Road, which was, I mean, we had to cut off the neighbors from how kind they were being because we were way over time.
Okay.
Totally different neighborhood environment,
That's right.
right?
That was-
This is
that
a
was-
left, they were actually, they came in opposition, their questions were answered, their fears were settled, and then, right, neighbor after neighbor got up to say, we're,
Going fishing together.
right, we're
Like
so,
that.
happy.
Oh,
The
right.
neighborhood is so lovely,
Get something that needs to be fixed.
you know, so and that just, those aren't in the criteria.
Well,
I think maybe there's some counseling ahead of time when they put in a plan. Right, maybe there's a fact sheet to
There-
say, here's some of the things you ought to consider, this is a small town and you really ought to
She
go
does-
to neighbors.
She does that, yeah.
Concerns. That's right, that keeps coming up, but that issue is rooted in another topic on the list, which is commercial uses.
Right.
Intensity of use, which is on the to-do list, but it hasn't really percolated to the top, but what happens though is the abutters who are concerned about that issue, and then when we explain that the planning board cannot resolve the use issue, but then they read the bylaw and then they understand that you can address the use issue by nibbling away at the size of the house and the nature of the house and all this stuff, which, I mean, to me, that's a legitimate way to address it. Cause, and we tell them, I said, you know, this is the bylaw, so if you come to the board hearing and you say, I don't want this to be a rental, we can't do anything about it, but what happens is people that dig into that bylaw, and then we get pages and pages of citing word for word, this, that, and why isn't the board addressing this, and why did you look away on that, but say that, so that also puts. We're not addressing directly a problem that people perceive as legitimate, but then, and then they're turning the bylaw against, you know, against the board, and then we gotta really be. You know, we get scrutinized, which is, you know, look at it the other way, it's a good thing, you're holding us to account, but also this flexibility, every project, this give and take. And so, yeah, I don't think there's a problem with it, yeah, we looked away on this because we were trying to solve a bigger issue and we put conditions on that. But I think it just sets up this whole thing, if this keeps happening, we're just gonna be constantly
Well,
on our
you said
heels
that
about.
the commercial use thing doesn't, it's on the list, but it hasn't percolated to the top yet. It would seem to me that if it finally percolated to the top and some resolution can be made on that, a lot of these questions I would have certainly, a board would go away. I mean, it's very difficult to look at the intent. We don't have the tools, but trying to make a determination, I mean, Bell Road's a great example, that was originally proposed, was 5,000 some odd square feet. It was
It had
I-
three
you know,
kitchens, three
7 or 8
entryways, three
bedrooms,
laundry.
7 or 8 bathrooms, it had a pool house, the second floor with a game room and the
Right.
pool and the whole,
there's a result.
and the guy who was presenting it already owns a property 2 blocks from there that does the same thing, just smaller scale.
Two problems.
There's only one use this guy's gonna do. Now, in the end, they toned it down, they reduced the number of rooms and a bunch
Well,
of
we
stuff.
now
Yeah.
have short-term
But I mean, we
rentals are
don't-
capped at two, so
Sorry?
the short-term rentals are capped at two.
I
Does
mean,
he,
so whatever the commercial use is, I mean, that was one of the,
I would,
No. no, I mean, you kept it, you can't, you don't lose, but you're still you're kept at two.
Right, but if they already own.
If they own every own, no, but if he already owned, but he's creating a new one, or he said he already owns.
In that situation. Well, that was actually before the cap went into effect.
Okay,
Had a certificate before.
and it-
So-
yeah.
But I think I actually like talking about those two examples next to each other, that one and this new one.
Yeah.
Because there was in that early stage. That was part of the board shaping the project to say, tell me how a single family home has 3 entryways with 3 mud porches, 3 laundry rooms, 3 kitchens.
Yeah.
That was a place to push back versus a single family home that's really big. And, you know, so I think just, I'll leave it there in
Okay.
the figuring out of the language. Of that maximum, I think is gonna be key when we do this.
I also would advocate that we use language that's a little bit more specific. Because when we talk about the business of the town and what's the economic driver of the town, it probably is rentals. You know, people renting a 2-3 bedroom house for 2 weeks on a sandy road. That is the culture of East End. When people talk about what's East End feel like, oh, it's a place where we used to rent a house and walk to the beach.
Yeah.
So I think we want to be very careful that we don't attack Airbnbs or short-term rentals as being a negative, because too much of a negative, because what we're really talking about here are these mini resorts. And that gets to me, what I view as the commercial use of the property when I have this resort that has 13 people staying there, whether it's a bunch of college reunion, it could all be nice people, or it could be 3 families coming in there. But the idea that the intensity of use for that type of property is too much for any residential neighborhood. Even, and if I want to just put my business hat on, is like, if I rent the house across the street to a family with 2 kids that want to walk barefoot to the beach and they have to have 13 college kids across the street, you're destroying my business opportunity. Like, we're trying to preserve the character of the neighborhood for everybody, the Airbnb owners and the people that live there and the retirees. And wherever you put that, it belongs out on Route 6, so. Maybe we look at other towns, figured out a way to, restrict the parking.
Everyone is trying to figure out what can we
So-
legally do.
I'm going to kind of wrap this because I want to be sure we get to the next agenda. The going forward on the commercial stuff, we need to keep monitoring Nantucket. I mean, the story is, they went to land court, short-term rentals were determined to be commercial and ineligible in residential districts. They went to town 3 times with trying to compromise this, which didn't work. And the 4th time, unbelievably last year, they went and said, we'll allow commercial activity in all residential districts, and that passed. And now the opposition is trying to get on so it's already been adjudicated in land court, and it has been a concern for me that we don't expand commercial development in residential, because I don't believe politically we've resolved the issue amongst ourselves as how we feel. And I think this is one of those things that if this gets addressed, I mean, the last time they wanted limits on short-term rentals, and it was very directed from Jackie and the select board were all in. So I just think that,
When you're talking about limits on how many you can own, 1, 2, or 3.
I'm just saying, technically under the law, short-term rentals are considered, land court said, those are commercial enterprises. Whether you have had a culture, if you had it, that's commercial.
I know, but if you're gonna advocate for that, then you also want to advocate for the culture of East End. The
Okay,
culture of East End is short-term rentals, that this is where most of the people that are
well,
here.
the problem is,
came here
you
renting a
can't
house.
start differentiate, you can't say, well, we like short-term rentals, but we don't want an artist to open a retail shop, or we don't want, I mean. There's a myriad of, so I don't want to go there, but there's a
No.
myriad of policy issues. I just think that they need to be addressed. And the last thing I will just say is, having sat here for 5 years, the conversation has moved a lot. my first conversation with the planning board is, who the hell are we to tell anybody what they want to do with their property? That's like verbatim. You know, some guy wants to do something, what the hell? Everything, so, and Paul, I would hear Paul, but we can shape and we can have conditions and, you know, and lawyers would say, but it's illegal and people would back off. And so I feel like the town has made a lot of progress from the anything goes. And I think we're now just, you know, learning. And so with that,
I have one very quick thing. Because we talked a lot about what didn't work. We passed inclusionary zoning
yes.
and it has already impacted positively a project that's gonna generate affordable housing.
Yes.
So I don't wanna
Yeah.
lose that
Yeah,
in this.
Yeah.
That was a massive overhaul, itself a very technical
Yeah.
change. The planning board has approved their regulations and it immediately has impacted the project already moving forward on Massasoit Road. That's gonna get us 6 units fairly quickly. And we have another similar sized project across the street
yep.
in the works, getting ready for the planning board now. So I don't wanna lose. I have to say
And-
that on
and- and you
record.
know what? And
That's
you know
a really good thing.
Just, can we just put a pin in that? Because at the
Yeah.
point that that second one gets developed or the first one gets ribbon cutting or whatever, we should reach out to Parker Munford and say, this is a good story.
Mm,
You know,
yeah.
there was a change and let's have this story. So,
Yeah.
any event, okay.
Thanks.
What did you say?
That's a good
There's
idea.
a reason.
Right.
Okay, upcoming topics. We have a few page memo and some attachments. I guess I'm gonna turn at this point to Paul. If you could walk through, I think everybody has had a chance to read this, correct? So you don't have to go every word, but please walk us through the big picture here and your thoughts.
Jackie and I utilized the rubric to try to filter
Mm-hmm,
the topic list, but so using that scoring, but then also looking at in context with other work that we know is coming with our department. So in balance, I just came up with, the four things that I recommend that the task force take on, barring other discussions that they had, 15th, whatever, would be, for reasons we just discussed, the site coverage. I think that's still valid, but tiny houses and undersized lots were obligated to do under seasonal communities, so. But both of those relate to. Another reason I think we're kind of lucky that it got postponed, because I think when we're talking about tiny houses and undersized lots, we gotta look at
mm-hmm,
impacts on what we're doing with
yep,
the
yep.
site coverage. So I think that was kind of a lucky break. So those are related anyways. So I think just limiting it to, and then just, the definitions are gonna be related to those, and we can look at,
Incorporated. in it.
incorporating the warrant articles, and I just, housekeeping, things that are truly just, we gotta add a comma here, something simple housekeeping that always seem to come up. And so my thought is just to really limit it to those 4 items, and using all the feedback today, we can, improve on our process, do better education, and hopefully these things are really, we can just get a nice kind of tight article. And the other reason for keeping it limited is we talked about, we want to keep working on our other topics, which I think if we keep front loading the work, we're not going to have time to do any of the research and the analysis. So basically that was my reasoning.
Can I ask a technical question? The last time we reviewed it, I thought our ADU needed like a language tweak just to be consistent. I mean, it's like a minor thing. Was it,
No, the AG did not approve the language that it had to do with the setbacks and whether it needed a special permit. I can't articulate exactly the technical reason, but it actually, we don't have to change anything.
but was there something, was it, how about, wasn't it the season, the AG's interpretation of seasonal communities gave, gave communities the ability to, restrict it to year-round rentals?
That's not clear in seasonal communities. We put that in our bylaw and it got
It's-
approved.
And that, so
That's
that's.
the language we have, so that has to be. Short-term rentals, 31 days or less are explicitly prohibited, but then we added in that they have to be rented. For at least 10 months. We use 10 months because it's seasonal, for some reason, seasonal communities, it's 10, not 12.
Yeah, okay.
That's why we put
Okay,
in all
it
the
just-
language about seasonal communities, hoping that the AG would link these concepts together. So. Whether it had legitimate merit or something slid by, we got it approved. So our bylaw, you have to rent it year round and actively rent it.
Okay,
Now,
I thought there was like a word, but that, if we don't need it.
there was a technical issue, which technically we don't have to do. Our version would have actually made it more, less restrictive, better. But legally wise, the AG said he couldn't do it.
Okay.
So,
The only other thing that was on the preliminary list last time, but I didn't see it mentioned, is the whole solar canopy thing, and so I was wondering why.
I do think that is important to me. I went back, I'm just trying to be more realistic in what we can promise to work on. So I think that is. It's one of those things, it's not popping up. It's when we sport it, it's like not scoring high, just because we haven't had any issues, except we only had one.
Hmm.
But I do think that one that is going up at VFW, it, it demonstrated that these projects fall through the cracks, and if we don't have solar, and also just with, they're gonna be more prevalent. So long story short, it's an important one.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to be more
Okay,
diligent.
There's also a related, but not exactly the same issue that I think is coming up, what's it called, small clean energy infrastructure facility. And it looked like from my untrained eyes, that they were gonna release model bylaws in July that were required, whatever that means, required to adopt within a year.
Yeah, I did follow up with the folks at the state, so I specifically asked, do we have to adopt any sort of changes to zoning? He said no.
Okay,
What's gonna happen though is the state is gonna require towns to implement the consolidated permitting process, which is what so it's more streamlined.
Hmm.
But that doesn't require any specific zoning bylaws. So we're not obligated to do anything, but then, so we're weighing the back and forth and all this, like, since there are model bylaws, that's something that helps us score this more highly. And if we do have to implement consolidated bylaws, permitting process, okay, it makes sense to couple these things. So really, to me, it was just, I could go either way. I'm just trying to be more realistic.
Yeah,
If the
agreed,
decision
agreed.
came down that like the timing, everything else, we're doing one thing, we might as well do both things.
Yeah.
I mean,
So that
I
gives
don't
us,
think it would be,
that'll give us time to take a harder look at it once they release the model bylaws and decide.
yeah, I mean,
Nay.
they're out, the models are out.
Are they?
It's
Okay,
all available. It's just,
so is that something, I mean, I guess we're gonna have a pipeline of things, right? Stuff for 28 that we start researching.
yeah, I mean,
That goes on that list.
this is the problem, is like everything's important. And like I said, we just went off about the commercial uses, which is just, that's, every month we're coming up against it. So it's like, is that really something, should. And this is the difficulty I'm having, is like,
Yeah.
I honestly, all these things are important. It's like, which one is the most pressing? And
And the thing that concerns me on that one, the small clean energy infrastructure, is that it appears that if the town doesn't take action within the required timeline, there's like a 30-day to say, yes, everything is good, and that it's a complete application, and then another year to approve or deny. And at that point, apparently they can appeal to this state panel, which if the state panel doesn't act in a certain amount of time, it's automatically approved. And so I wonder, maybe we have some time to think about it because there may be some complexities here, but nice to have a really solid grounding so that if we make a decision, if the town, the planning board, the building commissioner makes a decision, that it's pretty solid and it will win an appeal. So that would be my thoughts on that one.
Well,
I mean, there's limited things, I guess this is the point for having a model bylaw, but. These solar is like a quasi protected use. So we can't. Prohibit,
Right, right.
but you can still shape the project, that's the utility you have in the bylaw, so.
Because the
With-
size of
without
the
the
size of the Elks project does fall within the local guidelines on that. It's not one of the mega projects that all automatically goes to the state.
but are you saying that, have you resolved, I mean, I raised the issue of, is that project in opposition to uses? I mean, is it a commercial use? I mean, and my argument was, they were on the front page of the paper saying the private entity is gonna sell.
Yeah.
So, I mean, to me, there was a lot of issues there about, is this a commercial use in a residential property? I mean, there's even tax implications there about a nonprofit taxing and then spinning off and, a related business entity. I remember my nonprofit days, I used to have to do 2 audits and lots of reporting on things like that.
So again, it's. All of these things have merit, which one do we do first? I think going back to a process issue is like. What's the temperature of the community about regulating these things? And so, because it gets to, do we do a whole model bylaw to address everything comprehensively, or do we do something that, knowing we don't have the time, but we could put something in that directly addresses the use issue that says, solar of this type and sort is considered a commercial use, and you kind of just have something in there.
Yeah.
And then fall back on your existing site plan. So again, this all goes back to timing process. The temperature of the community, how they feel. And I don't have a good answer about.
Well, I can't argue with your logic because certainly the ones you put on the list are hot topics and things that will happen and will affect, what we do in the next couple of years, whereas the big solar projects, I don't know what the chances are of somebody putting a big solar project up in the next year.
But you could on Holmes Road,
You could,
and with that, with the community against that, like if someone decided that. all
Probably-
their parking
probably
lots
not.
are gonna cover, right?
Alternatively, I mean, if I was the pastor down at that Methodist church and I was struggling.
Yeah.
And I'm watching the Elks do
They're
this,
happening all over the
and
place.
can I take the front of my, do a canopy, and I can get my operating costs for my church done?
Or give shade to my parking lot.
Yeah, so I mean, and do we care about that? I mean, that's not a DCPC, right? Because DCPC would have all these design rules about,
That sounds.
it's outside, so we have a lot of Route 6 that's just a.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I get the capacity.
This goes in, like I said, this is like a process question that will.
Yeah.
Should be addressed, like. What? Where are we getting our direction?
Yeah.
This task force is advisory to the select board. The select board may have. Things, but then there's all these other things, so which one do we prioritize? And as part of that, like just getting feedback from the town, like which of these things. Do you care about most or whatever? I don't, And is that part of the vetting process?
and I'm certainly all for solar, but I guess the question. Interestingly applies maybe more towards the look and feel of town character, of which some of the select board has said, well, maybe that's not, we don't want to
We
regulate
don't
that,
care.
so I don't know. So, yeah, I agree with your
Yeah.
list here.
But you just touched on a really good point about what it looks like. There's certainly places where you can drive around California and you're seeing canopies above parking lots that match with the decor
Agreed.
of the design of
Agreed.
the building, and you're like, oh, that's a
Yeah.
pretty cool
Yeah.
green building.
Yeah.
And I don't think it would be a horrible idea that you drove through Eastham and you said, boy, I can't believe how green Eastham is. I've
Yeah,
seen like
right.
3 solar canopies coming through town. But certainly what they're building outside the Elks isn't that.
Isn't
That's
that.
just an industrial piece of,
Yeah,
what belongs in, and, the same thing, when we, for the yacht club, we keep our boats in Orleans, and all of a sudden one popped up in that parking lot. There's like 7 businesses.
Yeah.
and all the parking lot has a huge canopy, it looks fine there, because it's gonna give them shade, but it's in an industrial area. And so is there any path down there we can regulate the look and feel of them?
I think that's an area, yes, that's an area you can regulate.
Well, you know,
It's not the use,
And that's
strictly prohibiting.
Right.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one because the Elks originally, and we had been talking to them, they were gonna put it on their parking lot. And it was a way for them to get their parking lot repaved. But then they raised the, you know, some of the members were like, oh, we like the look of our building and we don't wanna block it. And so they clear cut that area off the, you know, to the side of their parking lot. I'm like that, we could have easily pushed back on that and said, no, put it back over your parking lot. That's where it belongs. And I think the new solar stuff that's coming in specifically prioritizes not disturbing new ground, putting it over existing parking lots. So that could have solved that particular one.
so just to pivot, I'm sensing that the 1 to 4 proposal for what should go before town meeting and what should go to the select board. I feel like, am I hearing any opposition to that? And Carolyn was fine with me. Did she have any specifics?
More general comments from her. She was supportive of the work plan and the topics as Paul has laid them out. So I'll say that. She, as always, wants to remind us about the reading level of public documents that go out, reports, language even used in the videos, things like that, to just try to help people understand. And I will fill her in on scheduling whenever the next meeting is.
So for the listed, I'm bored with that. However, I don't want to stop there. We had talked earlier and it's on the other 5 that didn't get rated as high, but the commercial use in residential district, that's a big topic. It's not, it'll take a lot of resources. And I'm not thinking that it necessarily goes into town meeting for 2027. But it strikes me as one that could take a year or better to resolve. And my fear is that because of the size of it, we'll have to put that on hold. It gets kicked down the road. We talked earlier, I said earlier, we talked about planning board issues, that if we can get some of that resolved, some of the planning board issues go away. And I think back to when I was first interested in this position here, there was a whole list of topics that we ultimately put on, and on there, it sort of weaved its way in a couple of lines. We were talking about people using their homes for wedding venues, bigger
Mhm.
houses and stuff like that. It was all sort of reaching in that. It's kind of been on the task force list of things or potential things to do since the task force's inception. And I'm just fearful that it may take a really long time before it gets addressed and we'll continue to struggle with some of these things. Now, correct me if I'm wrong on this, but of the 4 that we've talked about, number 1 obviously is the site coverage.
Tiny home.
Tiny house.
The site, in terms of site coverage, we're not reinventing the wheel at this point. We know what we're doing. It's more a question of outreach, education, stuff like that. We may need to tweak it here or there.
The
But it's
undersized
not like-
lots probably have to go back.
Right, about those,
Yeah,
so we get that as an individual topic isn't gonna be a big time consumer, because we've done that already. 2 and 3, those are topics that will take some time. But then they'll weave their way into site coverage. But and as far as definitions and housekeeping items, those are there every year anyway. Not to say they don't take time, they do, but it's sort of accepted. And I'm just wondering if we would consider putting in the commercial use and residential into this topic, understanding it's not going to be a 2027 vote. But get it on the agenda, start the work on it so that it's ready for 2020. Is that too much?
I don't know if I would put it in the top 4 that we would do, but I mean, I think this goes back to, and I mean, I would not be adverse. Oh, well, we have it on this here. We just have it to be determined.
Right.
I really think, Kevin, this is one of those things, this is a big issue. And it's gonna be a big community issue, a big public issue. And I think it's really important. I mean, I was hoping that the Nantucket thing would resolve itself, so we'd have some clarity, and now they're still in the mid, and that has caused. My sister does business over there, that has caused Nantucket, if you talk about community upset, it's been insane over there. So I'm just saying, this is a very hot topic. So I would be, it's here, and I think we should talk about it. I think we absolutely need, between Rich and the select board, I think we should have a conversation about this. Because if the political will to lead this is not there,
It's not gonna
it's
get.
not gonna happen, it's not gonna happen. So I think we should touch,
Yeah, but
think we
but I
should
think
kick
it's
the
time
tire.
we ask the question,
kick the tire, yeah.
you know, because if the political will isn't there yet, then it gets ignored for at least another year, and it's probably a 2-year project. So it's not 2028 that gets voted on, it's 2029. And how much confusion, how much frustration, how much damage gets done while it's not being.
Yeah, so I agree.
No.
Agree.
We have to take that plunge at some point.
I think it's a good idea on the 15th to put all this on a list that. And get guidance from the select board, like what is their priority? How do they see this? We're coming out with 4, and there's a logic to that, but I think we need to go through this and say, how do they rank this? Because then that's gonna help us set our course, and then that opens up the very important discussion about like what, especially in commercial, this is like a town altering potentially issue with a lot of stuff, so we don't know where it'll go, but it's like, is there backing to start exploring it?
Mm.
We may not like where it ends up, and we say, okay,
Right, and
But-
we always
but
have
we
a
don't
chance to
go
say
into-
no. But
right, because then, word gets out and what now, so we just wanna make sure that we're totally in step with, like, even if it's just start exploring this issue, see where.
well, just
we're heading,
gathering
what it would
information,
mean.
chats with town council or
Right,
the
right.
legal minds or whatever. And just see where it leads. It doesn't mean that we're gonna propose anything for town meeting next year. It's just gathering information
Right.
and trying to make some progress towards making a decision.
Right, and I think we've discussed that, the single to multi and the form-based, we were lining that up as like 2028. But again, maybe these other 5 get rearranged based on who.
So as an example for the commercial restrictions, would we potentially have a list of things to say, okay, if you're selling cut flowers out of your garden, or you have a pottery studio or things like that, that we would make an accepted list of what we agree could be happening in residential areas? Or are we gonna just try to say,
Well, I don't think we should come to those conclusions yet. I mean, we have home occupations.
Right.
It's just when something is not a home occupation. And the flower shops and I mean, there's a lot of things we turn a blind eye to because they're just culturally have been around. I mean,
they're part of our culture?
they're part of,
The
yeah,
farm stands.
the farm stand. I mean, the one, well, the one clarity that Nantucket had was someone sued. They said, a short-term rental is a commercial business. You say there's no commercial businesses in rents. And the land court said, yep, you're right. Short-term rentals should be gone. And now they've been 3 years in this.
Yeah.
So that's my only, it's already gone to court. Court has already said this is what it is. So when we open this gate, it's just sensitive. I would like to, oh, I'm sorry.
I have a
Yeah.
question. So if we did get into looking at commercial uses in residential districts, wouldn't that sort of then glide over into the planning board? What the applications we see, because if some of the people who really are building projects for short-term rentals would then be dissuaded from doing that? I mean, is that,
Or they could rush to get it in before. the
well, they
launch.
could, yeah. But is that sort of, would one impact the other?
Potentially,
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we're trying to figure out how to address that issue of the big house with the multi bathrooms and the pools and all that, and I'm just wondering, is that a way?
yeah,
To do that.
that's the big issue that keeps coming up, but there's all these little things that filter into it, the cut flower stand, the farmers. the farm stand at the end of the driveway, it's like. The stuff is ambiguous, and then when someone actually plays by the rules, can I have one of these? Do I need a permit? And then like, we're like, technically, yes.
But we wanna see like somebody with a pottery studio.
Right.
In their backyard,
Some of
and
these
they have a
things, yeah,
sign
they're-
out front, you know.
We want to encourage them, but then, so, you know. it's a
But is
lot of
that the
stuff
same? Is
Yes.
the pottery studio
Yes,
and the
yes.
mega house the same?
well, the mega house gets into the issue of it is different because is it being used as a resort?
Right.
I mean, can we, is the traditional, I rent my cottage for 6 weeks in the summer, my little cottage versus I build a resort, I fortify it.
The main
I put a-
resort thing.
I put a pool in and then I'm running it at, you know,
It's a business.
as a
Some of
business.
these things are allowed under as a home occupation, so the pottery studio.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Convert your garage into a studio and you're just selling your thing, you know, there's strict criteria for that limit the impact, but. But there are other things that the miscellaneous, again, that the farm stand is a. It's a whole thing, cause it's like, are you growing the vegetables there, or how much percentage are, it's into, and it's like. The guy just wants to put his tomatoes out at the end of the driveway, there's plenty of other people have it,
For 40 years.
but it's ambiguous, and then you get into this awkward thing where it's like, you've asked the question and now we gotta answer it, technically you gotta jump through all the hoops, but.
More than
If you leave here today and you never come back and no one ever complains that and it appears at the end of your driveway, like, we're not driving around and leasing that, so it's kind of like. It creates awkward situations.
Well, when you started talking, I thought, it's not even the farm stands, it's the eggs. I got people selling eggs all over. the
Yeah.
place. I'm saying, it's gonna be a lot of chickens around here.
$10 a dozen, for a lot of
Yeah.
people, that's
So-
capitalism.
the one other item on the list is coastal resiliency.
Yeah.
I chatted with Karen yesterday, they had their working session, their working meeting. And they've decided, she said, to go forward with the wetlands bylaw for next year. I guess that will give them the ability to regulate, I'm not familiar with all the details of how they do conservation regulation, but it'll give them the foundation to be able to do that. One of the things she raised was that they still haven't decided on whether to choose and I'm not an expert in these, the base flood elevation versus some of the newer modeling that the state is doing, and she's wondering how that might affect ridge height for in zoning. So I don't know where that all falls, but I know that's starting to be considered.
The last discussion we had was that we would work together so that we could do this in tandem. I haven't had any discussion, I
Yeah.
wasn't aware until just now.
Yeah, they just had the meeting, I think this was last week.
So there is no coordination.
Right,
And
yeah, all right, I'm gonna
so
see her
answering that
tomorrow.
ridge height
I will tell
question
her it needs to be coordinated.
Yeah.
is exactly why we wanted to do this in tandem.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
Mhm.
But
But if they go ahead with that, is that something that becomes important to us for this year or in 2028 kind of,
well, again, the idea was that we would have a discussion and
so we need the
that kind of
discussion.
thing.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
fair, that's fair.
Page, but that hasn't happened.
Yeah.
So have her call Paul.
I will
Um,
emphasize
I
that.
wanna be careful of the time. My 2 cents is, I feel that the single to multifamily conversion bylaw and the form-based code light for District D. I think these are two huge opportunities. And we'd have to do a lot of education, but, District D, we've talked about, it's the town center, it's the town center. And it's, you could say, is it a crisis? Well, it probably needs to be reconfigured, the space needs, the fact that there's certain things not in it. And a design light, because of future development. I just think that there's some real opportunities there, and the thought I had was, working with the new town manager, Rich, there is a complete street plan that was done years ago. And it would be really interesting to see if this got taken up, if in tandem with the zoning, could there be some coordination that Rich might entertain the sidewalks? Because I think if you were saying, we want to rezone to protect this, and oh, by the way, the capital committee is gonna simultaneously, this notion of how does it impact me? Or, you know, I don't see any, you know, if we could somehow get some sidewalks and trees and then the rezoning, I think that could be very positive. But, you know, again, that would be a conversation.
What are your thoughts on this as a resident of District E?
Oh, he wants sidewalks.
Wait,
Yeah,
really?
what's your feel, I mean, yeah, I think it's a shame, I think it's an underutilized resource for the town, that, you know, I think that we should have. Like, at least a sidewalk from town hall to the bike trail. You know, yeah, that's not a big stretch. But the idea of, you know, having sidewalks around the common and things like, what is your feeling? Even having curbs, and I keep answering the question, but like having curbs at the super ed, you know, the super ed is just a free zone. You know,
Well, yeah,
any place in, any place out.
The light back out to the parking lot. I guess I'm not wild about sidewalks there. I'd probably benefit from a little bit.
Not on your side, on the common side, like, even like, I can't imagine us having a town hall, a common, a library, a church, and a bike path.
And you have to walk on
And
the.
all of that's been a couple hundred yards. And we don't have any of it linked together in a safe way.
Yeah.
I take
Other
little
than-
kids up there, like when I try to walk up there from Bridge Road up to the library. It's hell raising.
I guess maybe I'm just used to it.
Yeah.
In a sense, because where we are, we see anything, activity going on at the library or at the church, because they use the library parking lot a lot. And certainly all the things that go on during the summer on the town common. If you start putting in a parking sidewalk, where are those cars gonna park? Because they're not gonna pull up on the sidewalk. They're just pulling up in the grass right now. You solve a problem and create a problem. But safety isn't, if you're trying to walk from, say, town hall down to the bike path or back,
Or the
the
library.
other direction, anything in between. Yeah, you sort of jump out of the way sometimes, the cars are getting a little too aggressive coming down at you. But at the same time, with the amount of people that come and go, especially if there's something at the town, they're parked all over the place. And
So you're-
they rule the road at that point, because the car's like, oh crap, I shouldn't have come this way, and they slow down to 10 miles.
But I could make the argument that the lack of sidewalks and the lack of curbing allows people to assume that parking is a free for all. As opposed to saying, oh, you know what, I'm gonna go park at town hall and hit the light cycle, and then now that I know I can park at town hall. And I have a safe, efficient way to walk down to the chapel on the grade or whatnot. You feel like you can do it, otherwise you're like, oh, you know, I can edge up,
If
I can
people will,
squeeze
they
one more
notice-
car onto the edge of the common, I think I fit here without being in the way.
If they know they can park at town hall and that sort of thing, and they can go with the light, I have less of an objection to it, because then you.
So I think your point is like, if you're gonna do this, make sure you make more parking available somewhere, I think.
Well, that's it, that's a big key. I mean, if you're just gonna say we're gonna put in sidewalks.
But there's also an argument,
Creating chaos.
there's also an argument to be made for doing sidewalks on only one side of the road.
Yeah,
That's all.
yeah.
So that there's parking on the other, and then you don't have parking on both sides, which makes it even more crazy, right?
Because you gotta worry about getting the fire trucks, so I mean, as it is now, things in the common, it gets to be a free for all.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
they park down on Mill Road and pull it back, and they're on both sides of the road in the common.
Yeah, it's crazy.
And
That's
the
worse.
fire department's right there, but they have to go around.
Yeah.
Because they can't get.
Yeah.
Possibly.
So parking is, so anyways, I just wanted to throw out the concept that I think if we did District D to try to engage the town manager into saying, to give some, you know, if you're asking people to do zoning changes that might, you know, protect or enhance the town center, I thought it would be a Benny if there was some infrastructure improvements along with it. It's a little more of a package, like similar to like Town Center Plaza, where we talked about a lot of things.
And there may be some synergies,
And then-
to.
Detail.
For the climate action plan, this hasn't been fully vetted and approved yet. But that's one of our initial high recommendations for the strategic plan was follow up on complete streets.
Oh. Well,
So-
that's,
And plus, the transportation improvement project is already been started, I think, by the commission. They've funded it. So I guess there's gonna be planning going on for something.
For the road
along those
diet?
lines.
For Route 6, me,
does it, does
Yeah,
that
I
get
think
done
so.
to
I
town
think that's
center?
how-
I know
it's not, town center is not
not
gonna
in
be
that,
it's gonna prioritize Northeastern,
Okay.
but
Okay.
But coordinating those sort of designs, I think would be really important. How much we have to do with that, I don't know.
Sure. The single to multifamily, this is just my pitch. Having talked to Paul, I think that I would be very hesitant to try to do townwide because the politics of that. But I think Route 6, there's a lot of Route 6 that's not covered by the DCPC. There's a lot of very, very old homes, single family homes. Now, right now, those singles could potentially do duplexes. I just think the stretch of Route 6 to say, if we look, and I preface this by saying, I'm gonna say, if we have this 2 year, lots of land use analysis, really identifying how many parcels, what's the size of the parcels, how close are they to marshlands so that we might have environmental impacts, talking to some contractors around, can financially, if they were allowed to do 4 to 6 unit apartments, if that was a conversion opportunity, does that work financially? I mean, in this environment, we have to figure out, can they build it? So I think there's a lot of analysis, but for Route 6, Paul's getting regular calls from people, like houses are like falling down and then what can I do? Well, you can do a single family, you can do a duplex, and people would like to do something different. So I think so with both of these topics, District D and the single family, and actually you could add all of these. Paul, one of the thoughts I had for the fall would be to try to line up and talk to the commission about which one of these could they give you technical assistance? Could we get a technical assistance grant in the fall? So it's not just the burden on you, but this committee could say, we want everything mapped. We want to know the parcel sizes. We want to know the age of the homes. We want to know, someone to do the arms and the legs work that has all that land use analysis. So then when you start thinking about this, so that's just my 2 cents on those two. So we've talked a lot. Are people, we're working on it. We need to get some feedback about when might a couple of these things be ripe. And we can, talk to folks about that. But are people comfortable with this list? As sort of like, we're gonna keep this on the horizon and maybe a few of these will start next year.
I mean, my recommendation on the 15th would be.
Yeah.
Put this whole list,
Mhm.
start with. You can get the guidance.
Yeah.
1 to 4,
Yeah.
but then also what's the priority for the rest of them?
Yeah.
I don't anticipate it, but maybe they might pick one of these on the chart and say, no, I
Number
don't
one.
anticipate that, but.
Yeah.
Just gets that discussion going. I think the other thing is 2 of these items, the single to family conversion and the solar are not in the strategic plan. Those have come up. In our
Oh,
realm here,
okay.
so I guess that would be the other thing is,
They may be soon.
right, but just
Thank you, Tom.
guidance on like. Does the select board support bringing those 2 back to the strategic planning committee to fully add them into
Yeah.
the plan? Because then that just gives it more weight. And again, just as we line up what are our priorities, things that aren't, and that's our number one thing. Is this in the strategic plan? No.
Sure.
Okay, so that kind of automatically downgrades it.
And to follow up on that point, I don't know if folks have had a chance to read the Provincetown Independent, but the lead story is Truro canned their zoning task force. We met with the zoning task force about a year ago. And it was an interesting meeting and they were amazed that and you would say, maybe we're not working close enough. They were amazed at how close we worked with the select board, like, preliminary agendas, getting feedback. They saw their role as completely independent, so they went off and did their thing. And their thing got soundly, rejected, or many of the things got soundly rejected at town meeting. And then the select board said, we don't want you anymore.
Yeah.
So, I want us to be cognizant. They took a very different approach than we took, and I might include that in my, in the 15th, to say, we have, we can continue to work on how do we perfect this
Because
relationship.
Paul's point you made earlier is that we're an advisory group too.
We're an advisory group.
Board
Yeah.
stuff.
I just met for an hour on Tuesday with the chair of the Harwich CBA. They're
They're gonna do,
looking at a task force and we went over all this. I recommend that they follow our model. And,
Yeah.
Cause give that political cover and then the task force doesn't have to get involved with that. Why are you working on this? The select board told us to,
Yeah.
like.
Yeah.
So I think there still are towns that are looking at a task force model to try to get through a lot of.
So Harwich is doing it, True had it, but now they don't have it. Anybody else do it?
Um,
Wellfleet's talked about it a
well,
couple times.
no,
All right. So
So the 15th is
the 15th,
15th.
June 15th at the
Meeting.
select board, so we'll work up the 3 slides. Here's what we want to do next year. Here's what we think is happening, you know, here's our feedback for process.
I mean, if everyone's in agreement, I can do a slide on just these summary points if you want.
Yeah.
Just kind of can present this as.
Yeah.
The task force debrief lessons learned.
Yeah,
And then set up
this,
what's the guidance on the list.
Yeah.
I don't know what the nature of the discussion on like the task force charge is gonna be. Or how that's gonna be set up in the agenda, but, or if it'll just all happen organically, but.
so I think I've talked to most of you,
Well, yeah, we'll have a new member, right?
Polly. Hope,
Well,
Hope.
I'll be there, yeah.
why do I call her
Played
Hope?
And who's the chair?
Suzanne, she was just elected
Oh,
chair,
Suzanne's now the chair.
Suzanne's now the chair. Yeah. So Jamie has raised a conversation, and I think it'll probably be on the agenda on the 15th, to look at our charter. Because, and maybe this is the issues, Paul, you mentioned of, I think there was a feeling on her part that a couple of our items, containers and fences, went outside of the scope of what she had thought we were working. So,
That we're pretty clear.
well, no, we don't even have to debate it, but you know, I just, so, and you know, what I've said to her and what I've said to Rich is, you know, 5 years in, you know, there's cleanup things, you know, lifetime tenure and whatever, and also process things, you know, as Paul said, this year's process was the same as the last 4 years, and that wasn't a problem, but this year, you know, we just have to calibrate it, so, and the positive news, I think, I heard this both from Jackie as from Rich, is they felt they didn't have the time this year to put the attention to task force because of budget and wastewater, but they were very, very supportive. And Rich said he felt that this was a very valuable tool. So I don't think from an administrative point of view, they're questioning it. I just think we have to work through some conversations about what it looks like.
Can we find the charter? Is it someplace?
I'm looking
It's on
at
the,
here.
the
The charge is online.
It's online,
website.
the charge.
I guess this is the summary of it. It says, shall examine issues related to homes and housing towards the goal of preserving any necessary and suggested residential zoning or regulatory changes to the select board.
We put a new
There's many,
charter.
though. It goes on, and then it got broadened.
Then-
Oh, this one doesn't have, it. Oh, there it is. Okay, got it. Yeah.
We added business and
Yeah, I
commercial
see
to
it.
that.
It's under the town.
It's in if you go to the, boards and commissions. And then go to the, what is this, the on board.
Okay.
Which is what the,
Do we need a vote for this? Or do we need a vote, or are we just at a consensus that we're feeling good about this? You'll do the PowerPoints. Okay, all right. So with 15 minutes left, let me address the elephant in the room, which has not been very public. I think the only person I haven't spoken to is Jackie, but you might have picked it up. I'm going to step down on the 16th, and the reasons are entirely personal. One is 5 years in, I started this, we were in COVID, so the first like 2.5 years were pretty intense. We didn't have a Jackie, so there was a lot of, back in those days, there was a lot of, we were doing all the research and whatever, but we're in COVID, so I was, you know, you weren't going out, so it was plenty of time. And then we did the DCPC, which was, you know, very interesting and all of that. I have been certainly over the last 3 years, have been deferring and putting off and saying no to like lots of other personal things, because this takes so much time. And I got to a point last January where I said, I need a break. I just need a time to sort of regroup, because it's, you know, between September and May, I can do 10 or 15 hours a week of this. So that's it, you know, I said, wait a minute, this is not a volunteer committee, this is a part-time job. So.
But the
it's-
pay is really
Yeah,
good.
the pay is great,
Yeah,
you
the
know.
benefits, don't
Yeah,
think
the
we
be-
talked
the
about
benefits.
That is,
So that, I mean, that, you know, I wish town meeting had gone smoothly. I didn't announce this in January because I just didn't want my transition to be, you know, complicate the proposals, like she's leaving, whatever. But I just need a break. And I've said to a few of you that, I probably can't help myself. I will follow East Ham's issues. I may write about them and, you know, give me, you know, this year, next year, this time, maybe I'll say, I'll jump into another committee or role or, well, whatever. I'm not going anywhere. But I just need to breathe a little bit for a while. So, so that I am going to write a letter for the select board, so they will have that for the 15th, so they know that. And I think, you know, I've talked to all of you, few of you have been very clear. What I have in front of me, I can't lead this group, and a couple of people are sort of thinking about it, and I think we should just, you know, maybe over the next 2 weeks, there's no deadline that you have to elect a chair, someone to do this.
Supposed to do it for July first.
For July, for there is a July 1st.
Yeah.
Okay, so we will have to have I mean, I guess,
Or whenever the next meeting.
I think,
After July first.
well, yeah, I think, yeah, or we can have a virtual meeting or something, but I just think. And, you know, as I'm leaving, you know, I don't dictate what the committee decides, so I think I will continue to talk to people over the next week, and if we can get some ideas and consensus, we can, maybe we can have a virtual phone meeting or something. So,
And before we go to the next thing, I just want to make sure we make it part of the record that, well, I say thank you very much for your service,
Thank you.
Barry.
Yeah.
5 years
Yes.
of a lot of work. And I think if anything, that's what's got people scared away from the committee, is when you see just the amount of work that you've put in. But I think the town respects it, and I think I, as a member of the town, really look forward to seeing when you're ready to reengage and you know, on another committee in town and put in your time. So take your well-deserved rest and respite, and
thank you.
we're looking forward to seeing you reengage in
Well,
the future.
and likewise, I want to say, one of the comforts I've had, and you know, this group has been wonderful to work with, and even, you know, past people we've had, Jim Kilvahan, Jeff Cusack, other people that have been here. People have given a lot of time and been very thoughtful, and were very respectful, and so it's been good, you know. I haven't, you know, sometimes, you know, I hear of committees, and not just here, everywhere, you know, where there's infighting or debates, you know, it's tense. And we've all just been very rational and logical and, you know, tried to get things through things.
But
But that's,
that comes from good leadership.
oh,
So.
well, thank you.
thank you very much.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. Set a high bar and
Oh, yeah.
the town appreciates.
Let me not scare you. You know, part of the 10 or 15 hours a
Too
week
late.
is me, because I feel compelled to read everything, and I feel compelled to like research everything and be online. So part of it is me. And part of it is the fact that Paul, well, he's got a lot on his plate, has much more capacity now. We didn't have that, you know, we had fits and starts, we had a person here or there, a consultant here or there, and it makes a huge difference. So thank you, Jackie. Yeah. So,
Are we getting?
oh, no, the new members, we interviewed Jamie and I and
You do appreciate your.
and the woman's name, Greer, what's her first name? Suzanne Greer. We interviewed before town meeting, 3 applications had been pending. After town meeting, 2 more applications.
Oh,
Jamie's perspective was that we should interview the first 3, they were pending. and we should do it in order. And so we interviewed all three. And we agreed in a rank order. The number one that everyone agreed is, Sarah Kojef, who,
Person is,
who's been with us, you know. And I didn't know a lot of her you know, she moved here in '96 to raise her kids. She's, you know, she's a historic preservation specialist, but has done a lot of general planning stuff. She's obviously, I mean, I just feel like a Sarah on this board and our ability to interface with the commission is gonna be huge. So she was the number one candidate, and the only thing she begs off is she's going to spend, not consecutively, but, I don't know if there's a family member, whatever, she's gonna be in Atlanta 2 months of the year, or Georgia 2 months of the year. And she said, you know, I would zoom in. It's not like I'm gonna disappear, but you know, she was very concerned that she wasn't here 12 months a year. The second candidate was,
is a woman, Tracy Vincent.
yes, Tracy Vincent. Tracy Vincent was very good. You know, she's her husband is the part owner of the drive-in. And she was, she's run 2 restaurants. She ran a realty business years ago. She's just been an entrepreneur, and she's very thoughtful and very calm. And I just thought she'd have a good perspective. We all just went, oh, you know, local business, you know, it's a good voice. And the third rank we had was Bill Munger. And we just ranked him third, you know, and he was very reasonable. He doesn't have a lot of planning background. He's, you know, recently moved here. I mean, he was a Teamster organizer, so he's got the union stuff. But so that's how we ranked that. And then what Jamie did, which I thought was appropriate, she said to all candidates, we're going to this summer, first of all, the task force takes a summer hiatus, so you're not missing out on anything. And we're going to take a look at the charge. And one of the things we should look at is membership. We've got I have early documents that we had 9 members, and I've been always calculating on that. Somehow on the screen, it's 10 members. We've never had 10 members, and I've never known that. So I don't know where the discrepancy happened. I mean, I remember we had a full complement. And then as people were leaving, I was tracking how many people left and were we filling those seats. So on my calculation, we potentially could have 3. The paper says, the website says 4. Would it, you know, that in terms of looking at the charge going forward, you know, I mean, I said that, we have, you know, there's both a commitment of time as well as a certain expertise, you know, or certain perspectives we like on the group. So in any event, the 2 that didn't get interviewed and are sort of just out there, is the gentleman who wrote that piece of paper. Szynski, is that his name?
Ellen, it's a woman.
Oh, no, that was her motion. It was her husband who wrote the paper. They were tag team. Oh, that document I throw around. He and Peter McDonald, the architect.
Wait,
Well,
is he Peter McDonald?
no, it's Peter McDonald.
Peter's on the list as well.
Peter's on the list. They weren't interviewed, and so right now, you know, I don't know how it would come down. Let's say hypothetically, we have 3 openings and we decide that's really 3, we have 3 candidates. And maybe the committee decides that, you know, we'd like to keep it at 8, or, you know, I don't know what, you know.
Let's ask Paul that question. Paul, seeing how this task force functions, what do you think is a healthy number that would get us running over all the time?
5 to 7 members to me.
5 to 7. I feel that we've been operating at 6 has been a really good number as well. And I think 7 would work, 8 would take a lot.
Well,
Everyone here likes to talk.
Yeah. If, you know, with my stepping down, you could bring on the top 2 candidates and maybe argue to keep the group at 8. I mean,
That make it 7, right?
What?
Carolyn,
well, 1, 2,
We
3,
should have a-
4, Carolyn is
No.
5, and I'm 6.
yeah, so there's 6 now.
6 now.
This
I mean, I don't know, I mean, this all got out of whack, but I mean, we should have an odd number,
For votes.
right? Not that we take a lot of votes.
Right.
Technically.
7,
Second.
but you're leaving, so we need a minimum of two more people.
Yeah. And the way the interviews were ranked, those Sarah and Wendy, Tracy would be names. Would, I mean, I would have been very comfortable advancing them. I mean, Sarah, without question,
Yeah.
she's just gonna be like another staff person, you know, I mean, she just has such a body of knowledge that it's gonna be, so. But so all those candidates were kind of told that, you know, they were ranked, and then they were told, we're gonna look at the charge and how many new, and we'll be back to you in the summer, so this,
Okay, yeah, because it's important also what other committees that you're on, what else have you done in the town? I think Sarah checks all the boxes because.
Sarah-
Sarah.
she was practically.
Well,
part of this.
and she's very plugged in on.
Yeah.
As a whole. Tracy as well as got some aspects of running a business in town. I think we do lack that experience.
Bill's brand new and he's trying to get involved. He just got elected to the housing authority.
I saw that.
yeah,
That
so-
was good.
I just throw that out.
What's the timing for redoing or potentially redoing the charter?
Sometime right after the June 15th
Is that-
presentation.
Is that
I
gonna
mean,
start with the task force or is it gonna start with the select
well,
board?
what I have talked, and this is a select board decision. I mean, I've had conversations with Rich. I'll tell you what I profit. I said, you know, Rich, I think if you get 2 select board members, yourself and Paul, and the chair and vice chair of this committee, and
That
have
sounds- yeah, that
6
would-
people hash it out and then go back to their respective groups. I mean, unless Jamie wants to really, I don't know exactly what she wants to do, but I think, you know, tweaking this, you know, would be fine, you know, and, so I think, obviously to your, if we've got a July 1 sort of deadline, that sort of says between June 15th and July 1, we better have a conversation, come back to the select board, but revote the charter and then maybe adopt new membership and have that done by July 1. I mean, it's not impossible, but maybe we can, is Rich back from his vacation yet?
No, not yet,
Next week, okay. We can touch base with him before the 15th, just to see.
That's a really tight time frame. So maybe with that July 1, so maybe there's a way to stretch that a little bit.
As Paul said, I think it's the first meeting after July 1, right? Theoretically, that.
yeah, we don't, it's just whenever the next meeting.
Oh, okay.
Now, whether they consider September the next meeting or not, I don't know,
Yeah.
but I think the intent was to do it.
Yeah.
Beginning of the fiscal year.
Well, I mean, here's something with the 1 minute we have left. After the 15th, I think we'll get feedback on the tentative agenda. We will give in our 2 cents. We'll talk to Rich ahead of time about the process. And then, you know, if this agenda goes forward, I mean, we were trying to meet like the 3rd week in August because we were doing the agenda. So we might be able to, you know, truly just meet in September, you know, and not have to squeeze in an August meeting, because if this is already done. And, you know, some of the things I said to Paul was this summer, you know, we had talked about, let's do all this land use research. Well, a couple of these things, like the tiny homes and the undersized lots, there's a lot of bylaws out there, there's seasonal community regulations. I mean, Paul and Jackie could probably come with pretty good working drafts of amendments by early fall, just from a technical point of view. So, you know, that could kind of get out of the way. And then you could go to, you know, then you could focus on more, site coverage is gonna obviously involve much more strategy around, public meetings and all of that. So that's that. Any other thoughts? So this is a long-winded way of saying after the 15th, I think there should be we'll talk to Rich, you know, obviously there's gonna have to be some get together about this. Oh, and the one last thing, I just do wanna say is Jamie was really concerned that we meet during the day and she feels like that was blocking public participation. You know, what I said to her is, you know, for 4 years, we met at night, and quite frankly, between people's other commitments and the fact that we were exhausted, you know, we kind of moved to the morning. Rich was really good. He started talking about, you know, we probably need to start thinking about this in line like the finance committee. Like the finance committee is really defined. It's very advisory to the board, you know, it's whatever. It has some real clear rules, but they differentiate, like when they're going to do line item by line item and really the detailed work, they call it a workshop. And they have a day long, not a day long, but they have a day meeting and they, you know, they're really doing what we often do. And then periodically, they will do an evening thing, which is not so much a workshop, but more of a policy discussion. So that's like you know, maybe we don't go to all evenings, but we bifurcate there. And I thought Rich had some good insights on that one. And the more I thought about how the finance committee functions, which is truly advisory, it may be a model for us to really look at. I mean, we're not a regulatory board, but you know, that may just be a model. Any other thoughts? Close?
At some point, would it make sense for Rich to meet with us and talk about what he's thinking?
Yep.
As far as,
I mean, that might be after the 15th, there might
Yeah.
be, you know. We can touch base with him. The man is in Italy and he, you know, has he got a CFO yet? No.
Yes,
Oh, he
Yeah.
did.
treasure, yeah.
He got a treasurer. Is that
we have a new treasurer and a new finance director.
finance director? Okay, I was thinking, I mean, he's got a lot on his plate and I was saying if he doesn't have a finance director, he's gonna be in real
No, yeah,
trouble.
all
All of that, that's good.
everything's been filled.
Great. All right. Well, thank you all. I'll see you the
Thank you.
15th. I'm not disappearing. I'm still interested in issues. People send me articles all the time. I read them, so you can keep sending me articles, keep my brain moving. And we'll go from there. So,
I'll see you on the 15th.
see you on the 15th.
Yeah,
And we're 3 minutes over. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
So.
So move, second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.